doing a lot of work with the private clients, but also involving government and private interests. But also his main focus is how to redefine the working space today and how to deal with large ambitions of companies that want to just build large campuses. You will see his work is really interesting in terms of urban design and redefining where to find urban design. The second speaker is Rameshwar. Sorry, I don't have your first name, but I will say. He's a practicing architect, urban designer, and academician based in Ahmedabad. He's also partner in the firm Shilanyas and has a lot of experience in urban design, landscape, interior design, even jewelry, which is super interesting. He has a master's in urban design from School of Architecture at Washington University in St. Louis and has trained with Kohn Pedersen Fox, famed corporation office in New York City. He won several awards, including 7th annual JAIPUR Award for Excellence and the 2nd annual JIIA Award for Industry in Udaipur. And just to he's also an advisor, an expert member for various organizations and institutions. He travels around the world and his work has been widely published. So he also writes a lot to books and monographs. So, and the third speaker is William Glover. He is a professor of modern South Asian history at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, USA. In fact, William is trained as an architect and has been teaching in the architectural school for about 15 years. He has a book published, Making Labore Modern, Constructing and Imaging a Colonial City. And he also has won awards for his writing. And he is former director of Michigan Center for South Asian Studies. And he has other functions that he has surpassed. So with this, I would also just say the way after the speeches, each is 20 minutes, I'm going to have questions and moderate the panel. We're going to do something different. Rather than one question, one answer, I will moderate a couple of questions at the same time and DJ them into response and discussion. So can I please invite Salil, please, to come to the stage and do his work. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, ARCASIA. Can I? Hey, this is all mine. Yeah, thank you. So, thank you, ARCASIA, for having me here to participate in this celebrated event, especially with all the great minds that we have around that we've had privilege to rub shoulders with, and to share some ideas of my own and experiences and learnings from my architectural realm. I am going to be talking about workspaces for people and this whole idea of can places that boost their economy also help boost their mood. And I'm talking, essentially about what happens to people when they come into cities and the kind of work environments that they're sort of being forced to. So that's my realm. We are an architectural practice based out of Bombay. And we've had the opportunity to work on a wide range of projects at various locations of various scales and varied types. And yes, the majority of our clients are private, are in the private realm. So they're corporates or they're, well, not so many developers, but we do work with them. We do, we do work with the government, but I don't want to talk about any of those projects here. It's essentially the ones which one deals with in the private realm that I'd like to talk about here today. In these, these are strange times that we are now in. There are sort of, there's a lot of us who feel that there is a great sense of polarization that's coming in across society. I mean, we're all talking about it in various spheres, at various levels, about various subjects. And people are, sort of getting more isolated. This is across nations now. It's not just about us in India. It's so it's across nations. People are getting isolated and perhaps even less empathetic about each other. And it's quite heartbreaking to witness, that more and more today, we're getting like a sort of demand from clients and pride from sort of fellow architects, and whether it's commercial projects or residential projects. And they're actually all talking about wanting to create gated communities. And that's now like the big hot thing that everybody seemingly wants to do. And, whether they're, and all kinds of, in the private sphere. And this is something that I think we've been discussing for the last 2 days about how the edges of the city are all sort of completely deteriorating. And we're talking about, the whole sort of spread of the city, and they're all beginning to look the same. And you see all these ads, and there is this whole, sort of a thing going on about gated community, and people are almost proud that they're making these kind of communities, and architects are obviously very proud of the projects that they're working with to create these gated communities. And, what do these really mean? I mean, they're sort of essentially gated communities are places that are meant only for people like us. So everybody else is supposed to be like not part of it. So you've got that sort of a situation that happens that you've got like the new fort wall, between this haves and have-nots kind of a thing that's happening across urban India. You've got these, mirror finished glass buildings which just reflect the slum that is outside it, and everybody else is inside this building. We are also creating these freeways and elevated flyovers, and that's again across India we're doing that. And what happens there is when you're actually driving on one of those freeways, and now even bullet trains that we are all talking about, you sort of enter a sort of a rarefied world. You zip across, and you look at everything from afar. I know, coming from Bombay, you have these flyovers all over the place, and there are parts of the city that you really never went to through central Bombay that you have flyovers through all where the mills are, or mills used to be. But the thing is that you're not actually going through the mill areas. You're like 50 feet up in the air, and you're zipping at about 80 kilometers per hour in your air-conditioned car, and you're looking at everything as if it's like on a TV screen or something. I mean, you're not really part of it. You don't really go past Sitla Devi. You don't see the smells of that part of the city. You don't see the Diwali lanterns out, when they come out in November. You don't really see the city. You're just sort of zipping through in your own little sort of cocoon. Yeah? And that's what happens even, like, say, today, I know when we go to from, I don't know, probably Jaipur, Delhi, expressway, and that's all we're all proud of seeing. But, like, I go from Bombay to Pune all the time, and you realize that my children don't know what Lonavala is and Khandala is because you don't stop there anymore, and you don't have vada pav, and you don't stop to have the tea on the thing because you just zip through. And so it's all the same thing as making those gated communities. You're in your own little cocoon here. And it's only for people like us, and it's not sort of inclusive at all. And clearly, so this is something that is, in a sense, happening, and we're all perhaps, and this is helping perhaps even bigots get elected, and become presidents. And you have great nations which are also now closing their door, things for other people, nobody can get in. So everybody is making these enclaves for themselves and keeping everybody else out, people who are all undesirable. So this is really what we're trying to do almost, that you're creating this little oceanarium that you're in there and the whole world is around you. This is the undesirable part of the world. So essentially, you're all, we're all trying to, perhaps wanting to become astronauts, that, you create this, this atmosphere which is pollution-free, green, inside this little thing, you're just, and then you're in outer space, because everything else is undesirable around. I mean, we're almost becoming, I think all these projections for tomorrow, maybe 20 years from now, we'll all probably be walking around like this and be very happy because, you got the really cleanest oxygen control, best filter for your visor, and perhaps that's all we're so think. So, and this is crazy. I mean, you actually have people who are labeled undesirable by this gated community set that perhaps all of us as architects are, guilty of being part of, creating and allowing to create, and everybody here who's attending this conference is perhaps proud of wanting to maybe one day buy an apartment in one of these places or live. So who are these undesirable people? You have people who are poorer than us, people who are less privileged than us, people who don't look like us, people who got here after us because we came to the city before they did, and they eat things that we don't eat and worship things that we don't worship, and speak languages we don't understand, and dress in ways we don't dress. So it's like almost, and then it's not only just people, you also have experiences and, the environment around, and you say, it's so polluted, it's so noisy, it's so dusty, it's so hot, it's so humid. So you want to create this. So really, I mean, we're really, becoming cynical and wanting to get into these little astronaut costumes sort of things. But at the same time, the fact is there are cities that are going to grow, and they're just going to keep growing, and all developing regions are going to have huge sort of growth in all our cities, and especially in India, in all the secondary and tertiary cities are going to see massive growth. People like Jaipur will certainly be growing much, much faster than Bombay or a Delhi or a Calcutta, because maybe they've already stretched, and all these secondary and tertiary cities are going to sort of grow and get even more populated and even more crowded. And in a sense, it's inevitable, as we've been discussing all along, that is established that the cities are the engines of growth and engines of change. And there is a near perfect correlation between urbanization and prosperity across nations. I mean, it's sort of a fact that every time the city grows by 10%, your sort of economy grows by 30%. It's almost that sort of thing. So when all the numbers that are being shown to us that our Indian GDP is going to become twice and 3 times, it in a way necessitates that many more people need to come and start working in the city. Because they're going to keep staying where they are, those numbers will not move. So in a sense, it's almost inevitable that we're expecting these people to come into the urban areas. But however, yet, though, the city as a place, if you have to look at it as a human construct and something that human beings have clearly invented and sort of created, and it has triumphed because obviously now more and more human beings, and half the human population is going to live in urban areas in the next 15 years for the first time in history. Though the city as an artifact or as a settlement has clearly sort of triumphed, as they say, the citizens who come and stay here are perhaps at a loss. I mean, they really seem to lose. There are recorded concerns that even if cities enhance prosperity, they still make people really miserable. I mean, that's a fact. I mean, there are urbanites are at a much higher risk of depression, anxiety, loneliness, schizophrenia, stress of all kinds than their rural cousins are. I mean, it's again a recorded facts. And yet people report being happier in cities that are, and in those countries that are more urbanized. So there's like these sort of, contradictions that are built into this whole development thing. And of course, urban happiness is equated a lot with employment and the quality of employment and the type of work you do, the amount of money you get paid for the work you're doing. So it's all, in a way, really related to work. So my, problem has always been in a sense that, so these are all these people who are going to, you look at the Churchgate station in Bombay, and maybe, half of them are sort of anxious and depressed, and, so it's scary when you meet people in the city. So what do you do as an individual architect in private practice? I mean, there are lots of people who are talking about government policy, the way the cities moved, looking at patterns. But here you have private clients who come to architects wanting these gated communities to be made, wanting these sort of, sort of polarized spaces to be created. So what do you do as a private architect? So we are looking at, starting with my sort of environment, Bombay, that there are sort of workspaces of two types, essentially. There is the old fort area, which in a way developed as Ballad Estate, and then there is Nariman Point, which was developed in the 70s. And they're interestingly both areas that were reclaimed from the sea. And shockingly, they both actually consume the same FSI, or FAR as they call it. They're both about 4. And they were both, they both, of course, host among India's biggest corporations. Some of them are at both places, in fact, some of the companies. But that's, where the similarities end, really, because architecturally, they're just completely different precincts and completely different environments. There's one which allows, like a pluralistic urban experience, options. You do feel inclusive when you're in Ballad Estate. Even if you have nothing to do, you don't mind walking around. You don't feel like you're not wanted there, or you're not supposed to be there. Whereas you go to Nariman Point, there are, you sort of, if you're not wanted, you're not really connecting with the urbanity of that space. You're actually, just like outside. You're like one of those people who's undesirable in a sense. And what is actually really sad is that, what is being repeated in Bombay now with the new Bandra Kurla complex is actually the Nariman Point sort of way of development in a much more, hyped up, steroid-filled way with all these sort of, glass boxes that are, in fact, increasing the alienation, from the urban space that is there. And what is happening is that clients are coming to, I think, all architects across the country and saying, I want buildings like this. When he's willing to spend the money, he says, I want this sort of a building, because for him, that's the image of, being futuristic or being whatever. So that's the whole sort of, contradiction that one needs to work with. We try in our practice to convince clients to not do this. And it's tough at all times. I'm just going to show you 3 projects that we sort of tried, negotiated. It was almost as difficult as working with the government. But, clients can, you can do that. And I think it's our job as architects to, in fact, be able to negotiate. It's part of, I think, what we need to be able to do. This was a site that we had. A client owned 135-acre greenfield site in New Bombay. And they wanted us to build sort of a master plan for the entire site. They had all sorts of ideas of putting a whole bunch of different services, and facilities on it. So what we actually did on what was an empty site, only those gray marked areas were developed. The rest of it was all just virgin land. So they wanted us to, so they had a sort of a lake on the site. They wanted us to put up, sort of make a master plan to show the traffic. They had these 3 big blocks, or 4 big blocks that they really wanted to sort of create. There were these 2 big headquarters buildings. There was a whole big Infocom center they wanted right at the back and stuff. And then we had to work on that Infocom center. And that was almost about 18 odd acres of land. And what they wanted us to do there on that 18-acre chunk of land was like make a huge 1 million square foot big megalith building that would be something like that with big atriums and glass, facades and they wanted to just, then put refrigeration plants to cool the thing down and all that sort of thing. We said, well, instead of doing that, can we break that 1 million square feet into perhaps smaller structures? I'll still give you a 1 million square foot campus, but instead of making us one big block and spread it around. And so it took a bunch of negotiation. It took some time to do it. The client, of course, as usual, was always, they're always in a hurry. They actually started getting JCBs and started digging up the site before even our plans were ready. So, they say, give out tenders and all that sort of thing. So you have to work really quickly and be able to convince the guys. What we did was we actually went to the HR guys, it's a big company, and started getting the statistics of saying, what is the size of their actual module? How many, though they have thousands of people who work for the company, we figured that they needed a module, which we played with the module of trying to figure out how the different ways in which you could actually configure that module to create workspaces, which then get connected to, vertical transportation, wet utilities, et cetera, So essentially, so each of those 24 by 24 meter modules actually grew like crystals, into different kinds of configurations, and we could actually set them up on the site using then the site vistas and all kinds of, the geography of the site. There was a nala going through it, open spaces, building shadows coming on the southern, the northern side. So you sort of put cafes where you knew that the building would always cast a shadow the whole day, etc., etc. So what we actually managed to do was to create, get people back to university rather than feeling that they're in a corporate place. Create sort of spaces that you could actually walk under the buildings, through the buildings, connected them with bridges. So there was this whole thing of being able to, slow your time down is not only at the desk and working in this sort of a glass box and going up and down the whole thing. We got a backhanded compliment because when the client was interviewed on TV with all these different campuses that they have, he decided to walk around this campus doing a walk the talk with the TVO. So for us, it was clearly they were proud of what they got, because otherwise they would probably have, never got another job with them again. So that was what thing. This is another project, completely different time, different place. This is in the heart of Bombay city. It's used to be it was a decrepit shed that was occupied by MTV, earlier, and they used to shoot their, all those crazy things in that sort of big, large, empty space on the top, which was a double height space. And our client actually took this entire, space, and we were allowed to use the plinth and use the volume of the double height as part of the FSI consumption. So you couldn't extend the plinth anywhere, and you had to use the double height. So he said, "What are you going to do with that?" I said, "We're not a studio. They're like they're a financial company." And so they said, "Well, make a great atrium, double height. You'll have a sort of wow factor when you walk in." And we sort of, again started getting back into negotiation and sort of took a strategy. This is in the heart of Parel, very close to all these beautiful old Parel stone buildings, KEM Hospital, and a whole bunch of these institutional buildings of old Parel. And of course, there is new gentrification of factories and mills that are being converted. So what we did was we actually pulled that whole box at the back into a long linear street. I'll just run this through now. We are sort of running out of time. So we just ran this into a long linear street at one edge of the site. We thought it was a much more democratic thing to do, that everybody in the office at all times can actually enjoy that double height space all along on the edge of the site, so that it also blocks the sun out through the day, and it actually shields the inside of the office at all times. But that street actually starts interacting, with the inside of the office all across the length. Thing, and you sort of, got like completely, we got like an amphitheater at the end of the street. We got meeting rooms that look straight into the trees. We actually planted a tree in the middle of the office and let the skylight come in, and that became a tree of knowledge, because what we sort of built a whole library around that tree that you could go and sit under it. The flooring pattern, for example, came out of all the decisions that the clients made us change. So we actually, kept the overlays of those plans on the site, and actually inlaid them, so they became the flooring pattern on the site. So, okay, so all right, this is the last one. It's a site which is actually still under construction. It's again, it was like a big admin building that was needed to be done, and we sort of actually again decided to split the whole thing up and create like a whole internal volume that allowed this. So that's what it's sort of beginning to get finished internally. But I mean, internally the whole thing just opens up and allows all kinds of internal connections that happen. So it sort of just allows the whole big box to be diluted, and allowing people to sort of meet and sort of interact and have a completely different sort of non-air conditioned space in there. This is just a very quick sort of wrap up to say that obviously Indian cities are growing at really, really fast pace. And the urban population of India today is more than the population that was of India when we got independence. And however, every state that is got high GDPs, for example, is the one which has got more urbanization. So if you look at it, you realize that all these states are going to. Rajasthan, for example, is much lower in the rank, but it's got only 24% or less than 24% urbanization. So it's Maharashtra is double, for example. So question is, what are we going to do for all these people who are going to keep coming into the city, and sort of say that yes, all architects need to sort of be socially conscious, and whatever we are doing, even if you're doing it for private clients, we need to be able to sort of, keep our sort of social antenna up all the time to see that, what we do for them is actually must benefit the city as much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was great. May I invite Architect Rameshwar to come and show us his presentation?